It's ninja time in the 22nd century. Welcome to part 3 of the 4Kids TMNT retrospective recap review thingy. Today I'm taking things a step further into the future with a look back at what many call the beginning of the end for this iteration of the Turtles. Do I agree with that sentiment? Just watch the video and find out. Now, as a reminder, it's debatable as to whether or not this is season 5 or 6 of the show, as it aired before the last episodes, which chronologically make far more sense to be placed before this season, but who really gives a shit? Fast Forward is a continuation of those first few seasons that sees the Turtles transported via a time window to the year 2105.
Welcome to the world of tomorrow!
There's some slight reboot elements to it, but for the most part it is a true continuation, maintaining the same voice cast and borrowing plot elements from previous episodes. Roy Burdine, who directed every single episode of seasons 3 to 5, directs every episode of Fast Forward as well. Although it should be noted that the vast majority of writers have changed from the previous seasons, and it definitely shows. Most changes in the season are subtle, whether it be the slight change in character design with sharper angles that most kids wouldn't even notice. Dongwoo themselves are still the ones doing the animation. The tone here is lighter than the previous seasons, no more turtles sticking to the shadows, hiding away in an old smelly sewer system. Now they're free to venture out into the world in the light of day, a highly advanced, brightly colored one, might I add. The future is a more accepting one, where aliens, humans, and now mutants can all coexist. But I can't quite call it a utopia because, of course, crime is still very present here. The first episode of this season is a rather odd introduction, as the process of being transported to the future results in the loss of the Turtles' weapons and clothing. Unable to breathe in the future smog, our so-called heroes spend the episode's first half fumbling around naked, a truly pathetic sight. Of course, the Turtles technically always have their junk hanging out at all times, but it's best not to think about that. In all honesty, not the best way to introduce the audience to this exciting new future world. Fortunately, they are gifted with EnviroPacks and Graviton regulators that allow them to breathe in the future air. We get to meet a variety of new recurring characters in the first episode, such as this stereotypical British police officer robot.
Hello, hello, hello! What's all this then?
His name is Constable Biggles, and I'm not making that up. And this guy, Jammerhead, who's like Freakazoid if he got addicted to crack cocaine and became the leader of a gang of criminals known as the Street Phantoms.
Are you disrespecting me, reptile?
But of course, the most essential character introduced in this episode, one which you'll be seeing a lot of, is Cody Jones. The great-grandson of Casey and April Jones and a billionaire boy genius with great interest in the past. To be fair, if my great-grandparents were friends with the Ninja Turtles, I'd be pretty interested too. Cody is one of those characters that right off the bat I assumed I wasn't going to like. I mean, based on the description of him alone, you can probably imagine why.
I mean, the equipment I have here is all junk, compared to what we could get our hands on over at O'Neill Tech.
But a few episodes later, I'd come around to Cody simply because I didn't find him annoying. He's not a complex character by any means, but he's always there to help out the Turtles whenever they need it, rather than acting as a detriment to the team. He can carry his own weight, which is pretty commendable.
I used to think you were just a rich kid living up in his tower, but seeing you rush off to help your friends like that?
Cody also has a robot butler named Serling, who also happens to be his caretaker, and a rather fruity one at that.
Donatello, how many times do I have to tell you? That is a Cuisine 9000 kitchen bot, not your personal science project.
The recurring joke with his character is that he hates the Turtles, mainly because they're a rowdy, inconsiderate bunch that honestly deserve the hate. And in return, the Turtles treat him like shit.
In here, you chatterbox, before you upset Cody. I'll take the soup.
But
And I'll lean this priceless-looking Ming flower pot against the door to help stifle the noise.
Serling will become quite a major character, not just in this season, but in Season 7 as well, but I digress. What is important is that the turtles are now in the future. As mentioned before, this results in some subtle adjustments to character designs, which for the most part looks well enough, save for Splinter's stupid permanent grin, which makes him look like a smug idiot. The overhaul in design unfortunately means the impressive shading isn't as present this time around, but what it lacks in shading, it mostly makes up for in a bright, vibrant color palette that I found to be pretty appealing. Some of the future apparel looks cool, while others my 21st century caveman brain will never fully understand. I mean, what is Cody wearing? Does that slip on like a Snuggie, or is it some kind of belt? The future also results in some impressive, yet impractical vehicles. Like, everything here looks badass, but why would anyone need a limo so big you've gotta walk down a set of stairs like it's some kind of private jet? Maybe that's just a millionaire thing, I wouldn't understand it. Or is it a billionaire or trillionaire? I don't know, to be honest. I doubt a million would be that much 100 years from now. A utopian future setting should mean limitless potential. I mean, anything is possible. But the truth is, there's very little about this future that interests me. A lot of episodes revolve around the use of virtual reality. Mikey's obsession with video games is a running theme throughout this season.
Tell me you're not still playing that Helix game. 47 straight hours of Helix goodness is about to pay off, bros!
And I mean, can you really blame him? I mean, I'm not as into games as I once was, but even I would like to see how far gaming has advanced over the course of 100 years. Episode 3, Home Invasion, introduces a recurring villain by the name of Viral, who is able to hijack these VR devices, as well as other machinery. Her voice and design really reminds me of Ink from Batman Beyond. I wouldn't be surprised if she was partially the inspiration, whether intentional or not.
You play this right, and I might give you a nice reward.
I detected your clumsy gambit and found this construct.
There's several episodes featuring her character that all feel rather similar, with her entrapping the turtles in VR as they fight for freedom. It gets a bit old after a while. I always felt the best episodes were the ones that actually did something unique or funny with the setting. One of my favorite episodes being Headlock Prime, in which Raph takes Leo to a wrestling match, only for them to realize that in the future they're treated as formal events that are far less exciting.
Pile driver waiting calmly for the Crusher to make his first move. But the Crusher doesn't seem to be in any hurry. The Crusher feints, trying to draw the pile driver off balance. The tension here in the arena is unbearable.
Despite being one of the better episodes, it also introduced the character, or should I say characters, of Triple Threat, a disgraced former wrestler who turned to a life of crime, and a character I care very little for.
And now to get the other thing we came for.
A fish sickle?
He works for just one episode, but he's really not a character that I had any desire to see return, and every time he would, I'd care even less for him. There's of course plenty of other new villains introduced in this season, but I'll get to those later. For now, I want to focus on one of the show's most glaring differences: the lighter tone. Fast Forward is a show that's more appropriate for a younger audience, while still being pretty watchable for those who grew up with the first 4 seasons. But as an adult, it's clear that a lot of the appeal of the 4Kids Ninja Turtles was lost as soon as it took this direction. One of the things that made those first couple of seasons truly unique was that the show's creators knew kids could handle these darker storylines. And they still had their limits. It was a nice balance of the two, where rarely did they take things too far, just far enough. Fast Forward is blatantly for kids. It's not like they changed it into an educational program for preschoolers or anything like that, but the changes are just enough for me to notice that something feels off. For one, I found the turtles to be less endearing and more annoying this season. Mikey's comedic antics are dialed up to 11, with Raph feeling less like an enraged hothead and more like a grade school bully who constantly uses insults like, "You gonna cry, baby?"
Maybe we should change his diapers too. And how about a bottle while we're at it?
It's honestly more embarrassing for him than threatening. Donatello and Leonardo feel barely existent here. They really have very little to do. It's like everything they had wanted to do with Leonardo had already been done, and Cody took over all of Donnie's responsibilities. A real shame considering the future technology seems like the perfect thing to drive a character such as him into a creative mode. Another minor touch I disliked was the excessive use of quirky music, to an extent where I think there's too much levity.
And I was under the impression that this battle armor was for your self-defense out in the big bad world of 2105. Or in the dangerous environment of your own home.
Serious does not have to mean dark, and I wouldn't have minded if this season took itself just a tad more seriously. But one thing I did enjoy about this show was probably, I dare say, the theme song. It's got a real punk, I don't give a fuck attitude to it that I thought would get annoying after a while, but nah, it's actually a lot of fun. I couldn't find any info as to who wrote and performed the song, so I'll just assume it's a similar situation to the previous theme song, where a band made solely for the show recorded it. But once again, I'm only guessing here. And of course, there's the villains of this show, which are, for the most part, treated less like a Monster of the Week sort of deal, and more like a dedicated rogues gallery, with each enemy frequently making return appearances. I mentioned Viral already, but I failed to mention who she worked for, a purple shape-shifting alien by the name of Shokunabo. His plan for world domination revolves around the Day of Awakening, which is another way of saying his spawns will hatch from their eggs and he'll invade Earth or something. He's treated as a serious villain, but I found him difficult to take seriously. His first failed attempt at world domination is thwarted by the Turtles before they even know he exists.
Might their meddling be more than coincidence?
Perhaps they even know of the Day of Awakening and are trying to stop it.
And by episode 11, the freaks come out at night. The freaks come out at night.
Come on now.
The freaks come out at night. He discovers that his species can't exist without burning up in the Earth's sun.
All my plans and preparation, only to be defeated by mere sunlight?
That's an M. Night Shyamalan twist if I've ever seen one. Another major villain this season, and probably the main antagonist, is that of Darius Dunn. Yes, Darius Dunn, the CEO of O'Neill Tech, who also happens to be Cody's uncle and guardian, despite rarely being around him. On top of his criminal ties, including selling illegal arms to the Triceratons and working closely with Shokunabo, he also plans to keep Cody hidden away from the rest of the world, therefore leaving him in complete control of the company. The Turtles are of course suspicious of Darius, who always seems just one step away from revealing his evil intentions, but always manages to avoid it. It's not until episode 19, The Fall of Darius Dunn, that the Turtles are able to catch him in the act. And you know what, it's lucky for them that he's actually a criminal, because up till this point, all they had was suspicion to go off of. Darius Dunn is, in my mind, an incredibly lame villain. There's not much to him beyond being Cody's uncle, but even then they don't do anything interesting with that. I think if he showed any ounce of loyalty or respect towards Cody, it would have provided his villain reveal more impact. But this guy's just evil from the start, and we never get any indication as to why he's that way, other than, well, greed, which is fair enough. Episode 19 is also when he reveals his clunky, dumb robot suit, which, yeah, not a fan. Most of the designs in this show are pretty neat, but this thing is just beyond stupid. Another set of recurring villains is the Turtles' evil clones, known as the Dark Turtles. Inspired.
You might say we are your brothers. Or more precisely, your betters.
These clones were created by Shokunabo and are more of monster versions, with any similarities to the original Turtles being pretty minor. They're like bizarro versions of the Turtles with big muscles but little brains, which honestly makes them yet another example of villains in this show that don't really feel all that threatening. There is a later episode in which Leonardo's clones spend some time with the real Turtles and starts to grow an understanding of who they are, but that's an arc we'd never get to see through till the end. And then there's Torben Zix, Zix of the Black Blade. Zix the Enigma, a smuggler who is always able to trick the turtles into doing dirty work for him. All the episodes with him are pretty much the same deal, and it is a mystery as to how the turtles keep falling for his tricks, but he's a pretty alright character. I mean, I didn't really mind him. Fast Forward also features the return of an old villain, who is this time around, surprise surprise, no longer a villain. I'm of course talking about Bishop, who has survived all this time thanks to his cloning technology, and is now president of the Pan-Galactic Alliance, which is kinda like the United States if it extended into space. In a previous video I mentioned how I thought I'd misremembered Bishop as a bad guy turned good, but as it turns out I was correct. Despite not being a villain here, I did find it fun trying to decipher whether or not he'd actually turned over a new leaf. Him still being evil just seemed like it would have been the obvious twist, but I'm glad to say that they don't go that route, and instead keep him an ally for the Turtles throughout the whole season. For the majority of the series, Bishop is the only returning villain who is actually in the present. That is until a later episode in which we learn Baxter Stockman is also alive. It's in this very episode that we learn more about Bishop's turn to good and the guilt he feels for leaving Stockman to die under a pile of rubble. Or so he thought, as it turns out that Stockman was actually planning his revenge for the past 100 years. Now that's commitment. And if you're wondering how a brain survived so long, they do explain that.
Though you didn't have to graft alien DNA onto your own body in order to pull it off.
The episode of course ends with Baxter Stockman turning to good thanks to Bishop's generous offer to let him use his Mausers for farming. Something Stockman probably should have thought of himself like over a century ago. Despite my many excessive complaints, this show is not without its shining moments. Another episode I quite enjoyed was The Journal, in which the Turtles discover a diary once shared by Casey and April. Splinter warns his sons that reading it will have dire consequences, so of course they read it anyway. This is what I'd consider to be the darkest episode of the season. Mikey gets the Justice Force turned into babies, Leo gets exiled from the Ninja Tribunal, Donatello loses his body and has his brain put into Sterling, and Raphael and Casey get teleported by a foot mystic to a far-off island, leading to the downfall of human civilization and the rise of mole people.
You gotta be kidding me! I made mole people?!
This of course all turns out to be a fabrication set up by Cody and Splinter, acting as a moral on why past events are probably best kept secret. At least when you're in the future, which I'm sure happens to everyone at some point. It doesn't completely make sense. I mean, if they knew what events were going to happen, then they could easily just undo those events, but when has time travel ever made any sense? On a side note, I can't believe they yassified the Utroms. The ending of this episode also kind of ruins the mystery as to whether or not they get back home, but it's whatever. A running, I guess, gag throughout the season is Mikey's obsession with a game called Helix, which is introduced in episode 4 and described as
the hottest video game on the market.
But then episode 5 begins with the launch of Helix 2, the hottest game on the market, and you're telling me there's already a sequel? Future crunch time is intense. There's also an episode where they go to the DigiGame convention, which sounds more like a Digimon convention than it does E3 to me. Look, all I'm saying is either these writers really love video games or they know that most kids do and just went all out with that. As mentioned a bit earlier, Sterling becomes more than just the robot punching bag, as in the episode Turtle Extinction, he proves to be a father figure of sorts to Cody, even putting his life on the line for his protection.
I almost forgot your birthday present. I do hope you enjoy it.
Cody repays the favor by reconstructing him as a transforming mech, something that I'm sure he wanted. Hey, the show tells us he's okay with it, so I guess it's cool. I think any of the episodes that interested me most were the ones that found a way to tie the past to the future. A good example of this being Clash of the Turtle Titans, in which Mikey accuses Silver Sentry's grandson of stealing his title.
Calm down, citizen.
Citizen? Now that's the last straw! Nobody calls me that!
What's wrong with citizen?
It's only superhero code for loser!
Nothing too complex, but a simple and fun episode that makes good use of its future setting. A lot of the show is actually pretty competent. I know I'm being pretty cynical throughout this review, but trust me, this show is still far from bad. Although there's an elephant in the room that I should be mentioning, and that being the episode Race for Glory, in which the Turtles enter a race with a character named Falcon that looks exactly like Cody. Like, do my eyes deceive me, or is that just Cody with black hair? I was waiting the whole episode for some sort of twist where they state that Falcon is Cody's brother, or at least cousin, but no, they just reused his character design, and it really threw me off. Day of Awakening may or may not be the intended last episode of Fast Forward. Most sources say it's Sixth Sense, but Day of Awakening just makes a lot more sense as a season finale. In this episode, Shokunabo's planned takeover of Earth finally goes into effect. The Turtles team with Bishop to stop this threat, which results in them winning, reducing Shokunabo to a pile of purple goo and entrapping Viral inside of Serling. So that does it for Shokunabo and Viral, right? But what about Darius Dunn? Well, those are all questions that could have been answered had we gotten to see Fast Forward through as originally intended. 10 more episodes of Fast Forward were in production before the decision to scrap it all in favor of taking the next season a different route was made. Given this show's history, I can't imagine how tough it must have been working under those conditions. It just seemed like 4Kids didn't have as much respect for the material as the people working on it did. These unfinished episodes would have concluded any unresolved plot points, most importantly with Darius Dunn, who I guess just continued being a villain and more than likely took over O'Neill Tech with the absence of the Turtles. Although, let's be honest, did kids really care what happened to Darius Dunn? I know I didn't. Most fascinating of the unproduced episodes to me was the one titled A Question of Honor, which would have seen the Turtles team up with Space Usagi, likely borrowing some aspects of the Space Usagi spin-off comics from the 90s. But whenever it comes to these unproduced or cancelled episodes, we have to accept that the vast majority of the time, the concept sounds way cooler than the finished results likely would have been. Plus, some of these episodes were provided the chance to be repurposed into scripts for Season 7, so at least they didn't all go to waste. Overall, Fast Forward is without a doubt the weakest season of 4Kids Ninja Turtles I have watched thus far. Is it awful? No, I wouldn't even call it bad. I think its target demographic of young kids is likely to enjoy it. But as an adult, it's easier to recognize any flaws that stand out, and I don't think this show was ever as interesting as its concept. I think it's a shame we didn't get to see this whole thing play out as intended, but I'm looking forward to see what Back to the Sewer has to offer. It's been a long time since I watched that season, so maybe I'll like it, maybe I won't. We'll see. We'll just have to find out next time. So thank you all for watching. I hope to see you then. Goodbye.